Hello everyone, welcome to the last session for Swic Week 2. Hope everyone's enjoyed so far this week. It's been a bit of a busy week. If everyone can please turn their cameras off and mics off, we'll be recording the session as we have done with the others. They will be available on YouTube as the others are. If people want things redacted or you say something and you'd like it removed, let us know and we'll work that out between us. Thank you. As we go through the session this afternoon, if you can please put questions in the comments, but we'll also look for hands up for questions during the allocated times as well. So this afternoon I'm going to start through very quick overview of Swic Week 2. John Maddy then will go through IDRIC and Switch Connect, the R&D package that's developing around us and with us. Jenny, MBE, will then talk through our funding opportunities. Thank you, Jenny. Geraldine will go through the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge and just sort of relate our work to the other clusters in the UK. And then I'll go through, finish off by just talking through a little bit about Net Zero Industry Wales, so the entity that was announced on Monday, and then we'll have some more sort of panel discussion questions at the end. So Monday this week, just gone, we had Swic Week 2. It kicked off with an in-person event in the conference room, thanks to Tata Steel at Port Talbot. It was limited mainly due to COVID rules for how many could attend. But in some ways that helped because it made it quite a personal event rather than a few hundred people there. So that, in some ways there were some benefits, but it was frustrating not to be able to invite everybody that we wanted to. So apologies for those that couldn't attend. It went down well. Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart, and the Economy Minister for Welsh Government, Vaughan Gething, attended. It was a 1-hour event with a little bit of networking afterwards. There were displays there from cluster plan, deployment, the developing ports position in terms of Milford and ABP, Swansea, Port Talbot, Cardiff and Newport and Barry. Then on the other side of the room were Lanzatech, Welsh Utilities and the universities. So the ministers got to tour and talk through some of those developing projects. So that really seemed to buy them in. They're really invigorated when they left. So I think that was really positive. I mean, we had collaborating our way to net zero in big letters on the screen. And to be fair, they toured the displays together as an act of collaboration, visible collaboration between two governments, which was superb for us to see. So thanks to them and the Welsh Government teams for supporting that visit. That was great, and UK Government team. At that event, Vaughan Gething announced the creation of the entity Net Zero Industry Wales that will effectively run Swic. So we, as you might know, up till now, we've almost been an informal grouping. We formed a steering team. We've been running for 3 years, no legal entity as such and no budget as such. But through that collaboration, and thanks to our lead partners in particular in terms of CR Plus and Costain and deployment and ERM with the TFI project, we managed to pull together various projects, and thanks to Innovate UK, of course, with Geraldine will talk through the IDC later on, but thanks to Innovate UK funding, we've got governance structures around those individual projects. But as a grouping, we were sort of informal grouping, I suppose is the best way to describe it. So the announcement on Monday, which we've been working and negotiating, I suppose, with Welsh Government on the best way to do it, was to announce the creation of Net Zero Industry Wales, which will effectively run Swic. Again, these lines don't show governance over the projects, okay, but they just show an interconnect to how it all comes together. So that Net Zero Industry Wales, we've got to go through now, create the formal entity, recruit the CEO, recruit the board, start the subscription mechanism moving. Then it will have a budget and governance structure to manage that budget, and also we'll set up common interest groupings. So I'll talk a little bit about this, okay, at the end of the session, but I just wanted to come back to the announcement that was made on Monday, so people could start to understand how that fits together. And so at the end of this session, we'll have maybe a bit more discussion about what the next steps are and how that will move further forward. Just so you're aware then how that fits together with Industry Wales, which is, remember, I'm Tata Steel, I'm seconded into Industry Wales effectively to work out the best way for that to happen, which is now what's been announced on Monday. So Net Zero Industry Wales will sit alongside the existing forums that Wales has already got for certain sectors. So Welsh Automotive Forum, Aerospace Wales, Technology Connect, there's a few staff within Industry Wales as well. So Net Zero Industry Wales that will run Swic will come under that sort of structure. Industry Wales is an arm's length body of Welsh Government and receives funding from Welsh Government. Some of that funding then flows down to these different forums and our future cluster entity to help us support our staffing and organisation. All of these should go back. All of these are subscription-based model as well for those different sectors, just to add that bit. So that was what was announced on Monday, and thanks to everybody that contributed and could come, and sorry for those again who we couldn't fit in to Monday. So that was a major milestone for us in terms of us as a steering team, in particular for Swic, have been working quite hard in terms of negotiating our way and understanding the best way for it to operate. I think if you've got 5 or 6 industries, it's easier to come together as a grouping, but when you've got 30, 40, 50, it starts getting really difficult to agree on a safe way of providing the governance to manage funds, so that this works. It appears to be working anyway. Hopefully it will as we develop and move further forward. I'm not going to go through these slides in detail. I'm just going to let them run through. So Tony Flora from CR Plus talked through the cluster plan project. You can understand some of the ministers were aware who the partners were, what the typical projects were being developed, and the scoping in terms of our 5-point plan. Sorry, our 5 steps in terms of us focusing on energy efficiency, fuel switching, smart networks, carbon capture utilization and carbon capture storage, how that fits in then with clean growth hubs that we've got in terms of developing local plans for Milford, Barry, Cardiff, Newport and Port Talbot, obviously, how we're interacting with other projects, of course, the deployment project, individual site projects, of course, we've got Ietf funding and other opportunities that Jenny will go through later, and other funding projects that have started either through feasibility or further. Our academic links, which John will talk through, skills and resources we're developing our way round, and sorry, I didn't realise this was on a time scan through. And also starting to work on specific formal working groups, which will help us as we create our entity. Again, I'll come on to that later on. So again, the ministers were shown that some of us have got individual then net zero plans and typically what's within those. Then we went on to the deployment project, the partners engaged in those 2 projects, typical overview of what that is, some of the projects geographically positioned, and of course where that one of the main streams come through that then is the Net Zero Pembroke Centre, how that interacts. So that's based around Pembroke Power Station and providing us with the low carbon power we are going to need, but also how that ties into the Celtic Sea and the Celtic Sea developments and green hydrogen or potential blue hydrogen feed as well. So the ministers were taken through those as well as through some of the individual projects. Then the rest of the week, thanks to everybody, has been run virtually on Teams. Thanks to CR Plus, and thanks to USW for running the sessions for us. They've been recorded, as I've said, and they're now being put on to YouTube, literally as we speak. So they're starting to appear on CR Plus's YouTube channel. So again, if you follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter, you'll notice links will start to appear for those individual recordings. So that's a bit of an overview of the week. It's gone really well from what I've seen and what I've heard. There's some real interesting discussions come through from some of the panels. I think it's very different to Swic Week 1, which was Swic Week 1 when we did that was very, this is industry, what we're doing. Swic Week 2 has been much more around what are Welsh Government doing and how do we interact with Welsh Government? What are the councils doing? What are the regions doing? And how as industry do we interact with those? Then yesterday was gas grid and how we interact with the gas grid. And the afternoon was electric grid. How do we combine and interact with those? This morning then, CR Plus Tony went through some of the examples and benefits of our industries have found by collaborating and working together. Both technically, but also just simply in terms of understanding the opportunities there are with potential funding and mechanisms, but also understanding some of the positioning that's coming through, the policies that are coming through. Again, by being able to talk together, it is so much easier for us to understand what the future looks like and what we're going to have to do and where we're going to have to go through. Even though this week we've focused on, again, net zero, obviously within that there's a strong emphasis on circular economy and resource efficiency, again relating back to our 5 steps. So sorry John, I know you just turned your camera off. I'll now hand over to John Maddy, who's going to talk through a bit of IDRIC and Swic, which he talked through with the ministers on Monday. Thanks John.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry, I was a bit premature there. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk specifically about IDRIC and what's happening with IDRIC, what the next stages are with IDRIC, and also about the development of Swic, what it means in its broadest form. But more generally, I guess I want to sort of talk about the academic support to the South Wales Industrial Cluster. And our work is not really in a vacuum. The way that we've developed as academic research groups has been stimulated by the industry in the area, and so as a result, we already have close relationships, and so that means that we're ideally placed to then identify what further R&D needs there are and how to take those forward. But I'm just going to sort of show if I can. So our general approach within Swic as a whole, within the deployment project, within the cluster plan project, is to work closely with industry partners and identify the R&D needs and stimulate through discussion, through identification of potential partners, the solutions to that, and then initiate the projects that address those R&D needs. And at the same time, the other role of the academic group and very much in this case, although USW are the formal partner on the projects, we're very much a gateway partner to the broader academic community, and harnessing that activity is part and parcel of what we do. And skills and training and again, the identification of need and then stimulation of solution is part of what we're doing. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I guess the third pillar of this is about engagement with government at all levels. And one of the things that's marked by Swic so far, and the academic role is part and parcel of that engagement, is engagement with UK government, with Welsh government, and especially with the local authorities that are most affected or host the main sites within Swic. And that's been very fruitful, very positive, and Monday's event was an example of that. So I'm going to give you a brief overview, and it will be very brief given the time of IDRIC and where it is. So for those that don't know, IDRIC, the Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre, sits wholly within the overall industrial decarbonisation challenge. And here you've got the complementary strands of the UK government investment in the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, including the demonstrators and shared infrastructure fund. And as we know, phase 1 has been completed, and we're along with the other clusters in phase 2 on that. Then the cluster decarbonisation roadmaps and feasibility studies. Again, phase 1 completed, and we're in phase 2, as you'll know if you've well, most of us clearly know. And then the third element is IDRIC, and IDRIC in that sense is a 20 million funded programme. And again, that's in 2 phases. And the first phase of IDRIC says completed here, I'd say is in progress. And the second phase is starting to kick off, and I'll describe that in a bit more detail. I won't go through all of this, and I've borrowed these slides from Mercedes. That there's a lot more to say, but in the interest of time, I'll sort of click on. Just to say that, you know, the role of IDRIC is very much this idea of harnessing the best R&D activity in the UK amongst UK universities and research organisations to support industrial decarbonisation, and specifically to frame that a little bit more, is to do just what I showed on that earlier slide: identify what the need is, what are the key priorities of research within the funding available, team up as best possible to address that in a series of projects. And these are multidisciplinary projects, and you know, we need to ensure that there's a positive impact as a result of that R&D. And where we're at, Wave 1 projects are underway. The core of IDRIC, so the central team, as well as the research co-directors. There are 3 research co-directors, and then the academic cluster leads, and I'm the academic cluster lead for the South Wales cluster. We're all in place, and now mobilising to try and ensure that this works for the best benefit of industrial decarbonisation across the UK. Second wave is about to kick off, and that's again a process. And you know, I'm reaching out again here, as I've done to partners already, but reaching out to identify what industry partners think are the key R&D needs. What are the unmet research and development needs that we really need to address, and in so doing, you know, engage in that idea of teaming up with the right partners and ensuring that we can get meaningful, impactful projects as a result of that. So please get in touch with me if you've got thoughts, but I'll be getting in touch with many on the call anyway, just to address that. I wanted to give you a Swic specific view of the phase 1 or wave 1 projects in IDRIC and what they're doing in relation to the map that you've seen. So from left to right on the top, there's a project that's run by ABBA, which is looking at the industry agriculture interface for decarbonisation and how that can work best. There's a project that Swansea University are running, which is looking at scaling up and carbon capture and utilisation, particularly using an algae-based approach in that sense. We've got a project at USW that's looking at improved hydrogen recovery from industrial syngases, and that's looking at higher efficiency, more cost-effective recovery of hydrogen, and potentially for, you know, fuel cell grade high pressure hydrogen derived from industry. There's a joint project that we're working on with Birmingham University, which is looking away from those coastal industrial sites and looking at how we decarbonise those inland sites, maybe smaller sites as well. And then along the bottom, colleagues at Cardiff University, together with Imperial, are looking at ammonia and hydrogen for industrial heat and power generation. There's a couple of heat capture projects that Swansea University are leading. One of those is with Birmingham University. I'm not going into the detail here, but there's intriguing science involved in that. But it's this idea of, you know, utilising industrial waste heat and effectively sharing, using that for benefit either of other industry or of the community. My colleagues at USW have got a further project with looking at platform chemical production on CCU. And then we've got a project with Imperial, which is looking at improved thermodynamic models, and that's got direct application to, as we roll out both carbon capture and utilization, carbon capture and storage, and that whole chain, that will give us better detailed models that will improve the engineering of those projects. And then last but not least, colleagues at Cardiff University are working on a project which is addressing the sort of public response to industrial decarbonisation, and ensuring that we're not neglecting the community and bringing the community with us with the approaches. So that's a snapshot and a very sort of general overview of the phase 1 Swic-based IDRIC projects. And just to sort of show you that these are real and what they mean, these are just two, and they happen to be bio-CCU, but the reason I put them up is just that they're very recent. This is within the last few days. Project on the left is a tweet that Tata Steel shared about the COACE project, which is developing acetate from steelworks arising gases, and particularly using waste CO2 from steelworks gases to produce acetate as a platform chemical. That's the pilot, which is on the Port Talbot Steelworks site. My colleague Rhiannon Chalmers-Brown is there being interviewed. So check out that tweet. And then on the right-hand side, Professor Darren Oatley-Radcliffe is describing his algae-based bio-CCU approach that's installed at Vale's plant in the Swansea Valley. So just to show you that these are real, these are pilot-scale activities at a scale that's relevant to industry, but they're moving and they're really closely working with industry, on industry sites, and all the benefits that accrue from that. So on to Switch. We've had, as I said, we don't exist in a vacuum. We've had a whole series of relationships with industry, but in response to Swic, or to further align academic activity with Swic, we're in the process of creating this idea of the South Wales Industrial Transition from Carbon Hub academic activity. And the idea really is that this is in support of industry and is a catalyst for further change. We're going to stimulate further innovation, but also demonstration and deployment projects, and really looking at how we can fully decarbonise the industrial base and how the academic community and the research activity can support that. And obviously, we know the prize of 16 million tonnes per annum of South Wales-based emissions. And this is about low carbon, clearly novel low carbon solutions and zero carbon products across the manufacturing sectors. And through that, stimulating growth, translating our research into new companies, new products, new activities, and hence economic benefit for the region as a result of that, and through that creating high value skills and new jobs in the area. But also, not diminishing the potential global impact, because the research activity here has relevance elsewhere as well. And sorry, and just to say that these are slides that I've adapted from Dave Worsley as well. So again, I'm not going to be able to, in the time available, do Switch justice, but effectively, Switch is, I suppose the best way of putting it is three things. It's about facilities and regional capital investment, and particularly, just within Neath Port Talbot, for example, I would point to the fact that we've got Cardiff University's Gas Turbine Research Centre existing, a hydrogen centre that I run. We've got specific activity looking at the novel coatings and power production from steel coatings in that respect. And we've also now got the Bay Technology Centre that's just been constructed, and developments also, for example, Swansea University now being granted funding via the Swansea Bay City deal for the Switch building on Port Talbot Harbour side, which will house a lot of their steel and materials related practical R&D, an example of which is shown there, but also further stimulate this idea of industrial decarbonisation and collaboration, both industry and academic, to do it. So we've got existing facilities, we're looking at new facilities, continuing to create a world-class research and support activity that will work with Swic to achieve the goal of net zero. It's also about delivery of projects, of course, and part of that's going to be incremental projects, working closely with industry, identifying funding sources, and getting on and performing that R&D, and at various TRL levels, from one to commercialization. And then the third element is about skills and ensuring that through that academic base we can create and develop skills and the skills needed for the future workforce. So again, in a little bit more detail, but I because of time I won't go into it too much. But essentially, this is a team of an interdisciplinary team of academics with expertise in each of these petal areas. My specific area is the hydrogen one, but across Swansea and Cardiff University and the University of South Wales, these are collaborative partners that have been working together under various projects, but we're bringing it together under the banner of Swic. And the idea really being that we build this really strong innovation and research base to support industry and support decarbonisation. So aligning with Swic is essential in that sense, and it also provides a platform for us to continue to generate and improve the level of expertise in the region, but also the spaces that I've talked about, and also the skills development. And with that, there's elements of interaction with policy. So going back to my first slide, there's that element of continuing this sort of continuous interaction between industry, academia, and government. And so my final slide is just about the skills element of this. And you may have seen elements of this before in previous presentations, but I guess it just illustrates this sort of continuous idea of a skills escalator, and what Swic and particularly the sort of Swic on skills element is to try and provide the talent for industrial decarbonisation moving forward. And that includes apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships with industry, and developing those programs, working with industry, so getting programs that are designed by industry for industry. So it's apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships, and developing those, and developing that as a much more vocational and clearly defined and designed route to skilled workforce. But it also includes doctors and doctorate and master's positions, and undergraduate programs, and tailoring our undergraduate or taught programs to suit. And when I say our, I mean across all of the universities in the region. Also about work-based learning skills escalation, so improving the skills base within the existing workforce, and ensuring that we can get appropriate delivery mechanisms to upskill the existing workforce. And part of that might be through enhanced online learning, and part of it might be on the job, face-to-face. But also trying to work internationally, and one example of that is with the European Steel Skills Agenda, which is a programme specifically working in the steel sector, but that's working across Europe to try and identify best practice on upskilling within the steel environment. And there's some really useful stuff that I think we can work with, and we're working closely with colleagues at Cardiff University on that. And finally, it's also about engagement with the community, engagement with schools, and outreach in that respect. And Swic is about all of those things to try and support the development of Swic and that route to decarbonisation. That's it, Chris. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks for that. And I suppose just to I was seconded to Flexis before I was seconded to Industry Wales, and the way it was sort of phrased, Flexis was about de-risking decarbonisation, then RICE, reduce industrial carbon emissions, and then Swic. So it's sort of Flexis wrote the script. RICE is got some dress rehearsals in it in terms of technologies, and then Swic is the full-blown performance. So we have to thank our academics for that guide into what's become Swic now, and now Net Zero Industry Wales. I suppose I was just going to add, I suppose there are examples around the world of centres where industry and academia are almost become one, where they all float in and out of each other in terms of secondment, in terms of projects, and I suppose that's where I think we'd like to go with Switch Connect. It's just that complete integration of industry and academia, probably like it used to be decades and decades ago, but we seem to have lost, and hopefully we can bring that back. Has anybody got any immediate questions for John? There's no hands up or no comments. If not, I'll move on to Jenny. Thanks, John. Thank you. Can you introduce Jenny MBE from KTN?
You are terrible. Just one moment.
Thanks, Jenny. Jenny, actually, just to give Jenny credit, Jenny is, again, one of the key people that helped us a lot with Swic in the early days, networking us with the right people and giving us the understanding of who's who in the UK and who we need to be speaking to, and helping us get going. So we won't forget that, Jenny MBE. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. So, hi everyone. As Chris said, my name is Jenny McDonald. Oh, apologies. Let me just stop that. Apologies. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the industrial decarbonisation funding that's available to you, some of it right now and some of it for the rest of this year. So, I'm so sorry, folks. So, before I get started on the funding, I just wanted to introduce KTN to you in case you're not aware of who we are. We are the network partner of Innovate UK. KTN has expertise across all the different economic sectors in the UK. I lead on thermal energy, so anything to do with heating and cooling. I support innovators from domestic scale all the way up to heavy industry with developing those innovations to help us to get to net zero. So hopefully by providing a matchmaking service, which is what we do for Innovate UK, connecting business to business, business to academia, and to let you know about funding that's coming up, we can hopefully create some collaborations that would lead to positive change for the UK. So on with the funding. So the first couple that I want to tell you about are R&D funds, and then I'm going to finish with a capital investment fund. So BEIS last year launched their £1 billion net zero innovation portfolio, which I'm sure most of you have heard of already. This is a 4-year programme to accelerate the commercialisation of low carbon technologies, systems and business models that will hopefully help to decrease the cost of decarbonisation and get us on our way to net zero. There are 10 priority areas under the NZIP programme, which I've listed there, so you know the type of things it's covering. And under each of these priority areas, there's going to be a number of competitions. In some cases, there already have been, but there'll be more to come as well. So I've provided the link to where you can find out about all the competitions under that programme. But today I'm going to focus on the industrial theme. So the first one to tell you about is the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator. This is a fund that's been around for a few years now, but we're about to launch phase 4 in May. It will support the UK demonstration of novel technologies that can cut carbon emissions through either energy efficiency or improved resource efficiency. So this is an R&D fund, so technologies, when you apply into the fund, need to be at a technology readiness level of at least 5. So that means you've got a prototype, maybe it's been trialled in a lab but not made it out into the real world yet. And by the end of the demonstration project, it will be close to commercial. So the demonstration projects themselves need to take place at an industrial site in the UK. So Wales, please, we'd love to have some applications from you. And ideally, a project should have an industrial partner that's going to actually have the demonstration at their site, and a technology developer that's developing that new technology. But other project partners can be part of the consortium, so it can include research organisations, universities, and maybe other specialist technology suppliers as well. I think the only category that can't be part of a consortium is public sector. Now, we're currently assessing the applications from phase 3. We've got the final set, but I can't confirm what the total budget will be for phase 4 until we finish that assessment, but it's likely to be in the order of 3 to 4 million. The fund is being managed on behalf of BEIS by Carbon Trust, but it's being supported by myself and Jacobs as well. So what can you use the fund to demonstrate? So the 4 main themes to the fund: you could do a demonstration of energy efficiency technologies that help to reduce the energy demand of an industrial process. You could demonstrate technologies that help with the reduction and reuse of water and wastewater as well from an industrial process. You could look at material use, so reducing the raw materials that go into an industrial process, maybe switching them out for low carbon alternatives, or even recycling and reusing those materials. Or you could go for a digital theme. So this is it's process controls, but with an extra boost. So not just the controls, but also gathering that data and doing something with it so that it leads to a reduction in energy waste or raw materials. In all 4 cases, you have to be achieving a carbon saving with your demonstration. So that's the important bit to keep in mind. It's not just resource efficiency, it has to lead to a carbon saving. So as I say, this competition is due to open in May. We will be having an online briefing event on the 19th of May, but the registration isn't quite open yet, so I couldn't provide the link to that just yet. But if you have a project idea already in mind and you want to check that you are eligible to apply to the fund, you can do that right now. So Carbon Trust have a page on their website for the IEA, and there's a little online form that you fill in with the kind of information I've listed there, and then we'll get back in touch with you. This is the first step in the process, so even if you wait until the competition opens, you still have to do this step of submitting your idea. So why not do it now if you know what you want to do and get ahead of the crowd? But that's open to you at the moment. The next one I want to tell you about is not open yet, but it will be open in the autumn. So the Industrial Fuel Switching Fund opened last year with phase 1, which funded feasibility studies looking at fuel switching. Phase 2, which is demonstration projects, will be opening in the autumn, and it's open to everyone. So you don't have to have done a feasibility study in phase 1 to be able to bid into phase 2. You do need to have done the work yourselves on the feasibility study, worked out what you're going to do, because you'll need that information to complete the application form, but you don't need to have been funded by BEIS to do it. So this is going to support the demonstration of pre-commercial fuel switching and fuel switch enabling technology for an industrial site again. So there are 3 lots. You can either be looking and demonstrating a fuel switch to hydrogen, or a fuel switch to electricity, or a fuel switch to biomass or other net zero compatible fuels like ammonia, for instance. It doesn't cover generation, but it does cover the storage, delivery and use of this new fuel as part of the demonstration. So there's £48 million left for phase 2. And as I say, that will open in the autumn. So keep your eye out at the link I've provided if you're interested in that. The next one is a proposed fund. Personally, I think it's fairly likely it will go ahead, but at the minute it's still in the proposed because we're waiting for final sign-off. But the Industrial Hydrogen Accelerator will hopefully be funding a demonstration of end-to-end industrial fuel switching to hydrogen. So just hydrogen in this case, but this time it does include generation. So if you are interested in generating hydrogen on your site, storing it and then using it to fuel your industrial process, this one might be something that you would be interested in. If it gets approval, then we're hoping, or BEIS are hoping, to open for applications late April, maybe early May time. Projects have to be the full end-to-end system, and it has to be low carbon hydrogen, but it sounds like a great project to me, a fund to me, so do keep your eye out for that. Oh, sorry, I forgot, I just tried. So the proposed way that this is going to be structured is split into 2 streams. So if you're ready and you've already done all your feasibility work on this, you can go straight for stream 1, which will be demonstration of your end-to-end system. But if you need time to do a feasibility and work out if it will work on your site before you then do a demonstration, then you could go for stream 2, which is an SBRI for the feasibility study section, because obviously that's BEIS wants to encourage you to give it a go, but it is kind of a high risk thing. But then a grant for the demonstration, and the amount of grant you get has been suggested by BEIS there in the final column on that chart. Again, this is open to change because this hasn't been formally launched yet. And this is just to give you some kind of an idea of how it might look if it opens at the end of April. So BEIS is suggesting there'd be a 4-week window for bidding into the feasibility study if you go for stream 2, and a 12-week window if you go for stream 1 demo. Stream 1 demonstrations would be about 28 months in duration, and then feasibility study is 5 months, and stream 2 demonstrations 23 months. But I've again provided the link. If you're interested in that, keep your eye on that link, because that's where it will be posted once it, fingers crossed, opens. So now we've done the R&D, I'm going to move on to the Capital Investment Fund. So the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund is a fund that's supporting businesses with high energy use to cut their energy demand and the carbon emissions associated with the industrial process. And as I said, it's not R&D funding. You're not demonstrating anything. These are technologies that have already been demonstrated in the real world. So this is capital investment to de-risk it, reduce those payback periods so that you can do something straight away that you wouldn't be able to do without government support. And it can either be deploying energy efficiency technology or deploying decarbonisation technology. So phase 2 kicked off in the autumn last year with a total budget of 220 million. We had the autumn window last year. We're currently in the spring window now, which is worth £60 million for sites in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And there will be a further 2 windows in the summer and in the autumn this year to use up the remainder of the 220 million. For this window, there are 3 competitions that you can bid for. So you can either bid to do a feasibility or engineering study to prepare for a future deployment of energy efficiency or decarbonisation. Or if you've already done that, you can go straight into either deployment of mature energy efficiency technologies, as I said, that reduce the energy demand of an industrial process. And when we say mature, we're talking about technology readiness level 8 to 9. So it's already been demonstrated and proven at scale at somewhere else in the UK before, and you're deploying it on, permanently deploying it on your site. Or you can bid in for the deployment of decarbonisation technologies that reduce the carbon emissions associated with the industrial process. And because of the nature of some of those technologies, you can deploy a technology at TRL 7. So that hasn't been demonstrated at scale in the real world, but you are doing this as a permanent deployment. Those 3 competitions close on the 29th of April, so about a month from today, but you do, as I say, have another 2 competition windows this year too. So let's have a look at those competitions in a little bit more detail. I provided all the kind of key information about the studies and the other 2 competitions as well, which I won't go through the charts because you can read that for yourselves. But just to explain the difference between the feasibility study and the engineering study, the feasibility study is giving you a bit of time and money to assess the technical and economic viability of deploying a particular technology at an industrial site. So it's not funding you to do a review of all the best available technologies before you decide what you want to do. And it's not funding you to do an energy model of all of your energy demand across your site before deciding what to do. You have to have already done that step. But then coming to the Ietf, bidding for the feasibility study, by the end of that project, you can say, yes, I am going to deploy a heat recovery unit, or no, I'm not, depending on the results of the study. The engineering study then is the next step in the journey. So you've decided, yes, we're going to deploy, and this gives you some time and money to get ready for that installation. So you're developing your technical specification for the project, you're getting your health and safety and risk assessments done, you get submitting planning permits, consents, things like that. All of that would be covered by the engineering study. So moving on to the deployment. On the energy efficiency deployment side, you're being assessed on the energy savings that you hope to achieve by deploying this technology versus the grant that you're going to claim. So it's a value for money assessment that you're going to be assessed on. And at the end of the project, because it's not an R&D project, it has to be fully installed and operating so that you're saving energy straight away. You'll notice on the chart there, the minimum threshold for the grant is £100,000. So that's the minimum amount you have to claim, and then your match funding is on top of that. But you can pool things together. So if you were doing and putting a new furnace in, having heat recovery, process controls, that can all go on one application because they're all energy efficiency, and then hopefully that will help you get over that minimum grant limit. You can also, if you have more than one site, do heat recovery at both sites and put that into one application to help you with that £100,000 minimum limit. The amount of grant you get depends on the size of your company, as you can see the maximum subsidy intensity there, but also on the geographical location of the site where the technology is going to be deployed. So if your site is in an assisted area, you get extra % on top of what you can see on the screen at the moment. So there's a map on the Ietf website that shows where all the assisted areas are, so you can check out if you're entitled to more grant. On the decarbonisation side, you're being assessed on the carbon savings versus the grant that you're going to claim. So again, another value for money assessment. But in this case, it is just carbon. So if your energy demand stays the same or even goes up slightly, that's absolutely fine. You're being assessed on the carbon saving. But again, even if you choose a TRL7 technology, the technology must be permanently deployed and operating when you finish the project so that you're achieving those carbon savings straight away. So what's in scope for the Ietf? It's largely a technology neutral fund, but we've listed a few of the things that we've seen coming through in other rounds that are in scope. So process optimization, as I said, you could put process controls along the full line of your industrial process to optimize it, or maybe controls on individual pieces of process equipment. You could look at upgrading process equipment, so putting in more energy efficient versions of dryers, ovens, kilns, chillers, whatever you use for your industrial process. And you can also look at heat recovery, waste pressure recovery, and as long as you're reusing that energy in your industrial or manufacturing process. So maybe use a heat pump to upgrade your waste heat so that you can then use it again, or using an organic Rankine cycle to convert that heat into power so that you can use the power on your industrial process. On the decarbonisation side, the two obvious choices are fuel switching. So as long as you're fuel switching to a fuel that has a lower carbon intensity than the one you're currently using, and it's no higher than the carbon intensity of gas in the grid, that would be in scope. So things like electrification, switching to hydrogen or hydrogen blends, switching to biomass or biogas. There are extra rules about the bioenergy side, so do go and check those out. And then on-site carbon capture and utilisation is also in scope. So if you are, as long as you're capturing the CO2 from existing industrial equipment and you've got an identified end user for that captured CO2, which is then displacing where they usually get their CO2 from, that would be in scope. We need to see that there's a net reduction in carbon emissions for it to be okay. So to give you an example, this was one of the projects funded in phase 1 back in summer 2020. So Hinton Perry and Davin Hill are a ceramics company in the Midlands, and they use gas in their dryers to dry the bricks and tiles that they manufacture. And they did a study to look at recovering heat from the exhaust flue gases coming out the kiln, absorbing the heat into hot oil, and then using the hot oil to deliver that heat to their drying chambers where the bricks and tiles were dried. It was a great project and they had good results, so they are now hoping to bid for a deployment competition to actually go ahead and do that on their site. So there's plenty of support for you bidding into the Ietf. I've provided a link to the competition guidance, as with the other funds. Again, with this one, if you want to check whether you're eligible to lead the project or whether what you want to do is eligible, you can send an email into the Ietf email. I definitely recommend you do that before you go to all the trouble of writing the application form. If you're looking for partners, we have a dedicated Ietf networking platform with over 350 people on there that are all interested in the fund, so you can direct message them. And if you're an industrial site owner and you have no idea what to do on your site, we have a technology marketplace, which is an online platform with 5-minute videos describing different technologies that are all eligible for the Ietf. And you can register for access to that platform. It will be open until the end of the programme in March 2025. And then finally, we have a competition clinic, so little webinars where you can drop in and put questions to myself and BEIS. They're going to be happening every week in April. So if you want to come along to any of those, then please do register at the link I've provided. And I think that's me finished. Oh, and my contact details in case you want to get in touch. That's it.
Thanks, Jenny. We're just looking at comments now. We've got a couple of questions. Okay. One from Tony Barton. On the funds, what is the latest news on the time between the award and setup? Obviously, delivery changes have made a bit problematic. Are timescales improving?
Does that relate to the Ietf? I think it might do.
I'm guessing it does, yeah.
I'm going to hand that one over to Lily then, if you don't mind, Lily. So Lily Tozer is on the call with me from BEIS, from the Ietf team.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi, and thanks, Jenny, for your presentation. So it's a really good question, and I think it's fair to say that anyone that has experienced the Ietf application beforehand, so in our last competition window, which was autumn 22, you might well have found that some of the follow-up processes took a bit longer than they did in phase 1, and that's because we've been tweaking and changing some of our processes, and like all these things, we've encountered some sort of teething problems and so on. So we're hoping that for future windows, or actually we'll make sure that for future windows, that will be a shorter period between your application coming through to us, it being assessed, and then ultimately you getting your funding. So the short answer to that is yes, it will be shorter.
Thanks, Lily. I've got one from Marcia. On heat recovery, could you transfer the heat to another industrial user, or does it have to be reused in your own process?
Go, Lily.
Yeah, I can take that one too. So unfortunately, you would have to use the heat in your own process. Certainly encourage as a department heat networks and transferring heat wherever it's most needed. But the Ietf itself is all about decarbonising on-site processes. So you'd need to show that you're offsetting an existing heat need on your own site.
Okay, thank you. And for those that don't know, Marcia, who's put a few comments in, is Welsh Government, and she again is one of the has been a huge support with us. I suppose bridging the gap between innovation opportunity and written funded bid. So thanks to Marcia. Thanks, Lily. Anybody got any more questions?
Chris, do you want me to do a quick shout out for the EF as well?
Yes, please. Yeah.
we mentioned that before and I forgot to say it. So the BEIS also have, not industrial, but they also have a fund called the Energy Entrepreneurs Fund. So if you are a technology developer around energy technologies, so we're talking energy efficiency, power generation, heat generation, energy storage, security of supply, or greenhouse gas removal, that's all the themes. And you want to develop or demonstrate your energy technologies with support from BEIS, then the EEF is open right now. It closes on the 11th of May, and there will be a briefing event on the 5th of April. So if you're interested in that, then just do a Google on Energy Entrepreneurs Fund Round 9.
Thank you. I suppose most people will be trying to digest what you said. So in terms of, we've got your recording now on YouTube, thanks Jenny, because people can sit back and relax and listen to it back. And also in terms of your slides, it's okay for us to distribute your slides around for everybody to get the links and build from there.
Absolutely.
Great, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks Lily. Thanks Jenny. Thanks. Right. Now we'll move to Geraldine, please. And Geraldine is our boss.
I wouldn't say that.
In terms of Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, Geraldine is obviously our main link with IUK, Innovate UK, and our projects. Thanks, Geraldine.
Thanks. Bear with me until I get my slides up and my notes up. Right, hopefully everybody can see the slides in full. Chris, could you confirm?
Yeah, sorry, Geraldine. Yeah,
no, that's fine. Just
couldn't
want to
find
make sure everybody can see the full slide. Thank you very much. So yes, as Chris mentioned, I'm Geraldine Matto. I'm the program manager for the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, but I have a specific remit for looking after the South Wales Industrial Cluster. Hence me being here and knowing the South Wales Cluster Plan and Deployment Project pretty well. So I'll be giving a bit of a presentation with a bit of an overview of the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, where it came from, what it's about. And I will kind of also be giving a bit of presentation on what industrial clusters we are supporting and a little bit about what it is that they do. So I'll be going back in time a little bit just to explain that the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge started back in 2019 as part of the government's industrial clusters mission. And as you can see, this was to develop at least one low carbon industrial cluster by 2030 and the world's first net zero industrial cluster by 2040. And at the time that felt like quite ambitious, and I can see the title of my slide, it says ambitious government targets for net zero. I think it's very clear with everyone, especially with all of the Swic week 2, that the message is quite clear. There's a lot of ambition around net zero. So it started with one cluster, which then became 2, which then became 4. And became 4 is very much as a result of colleagues in BEIS in central government seeing what was happening with the projects that we were funding, and were fairly confident, to give them a fair amount of confidence that the UK could reach potentially 4 decarbonised clusters by 2030. And the ambition has steadily increased. So it went from 3 million tons of CO2 in March 2021, when the Industrial Decarbonisation Strategy was announced, to doubled by 6 million tons of CO2 reduction in a net zero strategy that was published in October last year. So the ambition never stops, which is absolutely great to hear. And this particular programme, the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, focuses in particular on industrial clusters, of which Swic is one of those. You see the title again: industry emits vast percentage of the UK emissions. This is no surprise to anyone. But over that, half of those emissions arise in clustered sites, or in industrial clusters. So that's where there's kind of fairly concentrated locations of industry in one particular area. And this program particularly focuses on cluster sites, and it is very clear that to meet net zero targets, the UK industry must reduce its carbon emissions and adopt low carbon technologies. This will require significant transformation. This transformation will cost billions of pounds. There is absolutely no doubt about that, and that's where the Industrial Decarbonisation stepped in. We are the first step in enabling this transformative process. So it's our job, together with UK industrial partners and other partners, as has been demonstrated in Swic. It's not just industry, but it's local and regional and devolved governments in the case of South Wales partners, to lay the foundation to meet net zero by 2050. And ensure the UK industry remains attractive for investments, provides jobs, new export of opportunities. As John Maddy alluded to earlier, thanks John for covering a little bit of my overview of the programme. The Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge is split into 3 work streams, as you can see on the screen. One is called deployment, one is called cluster plans, and IDRIC. John beautifully explained some of what this was, so I'll try to remain brief on this. It's basically, as John mentioned earlier, the 3 work streams complement one another. They really support one another. The budget overall in terms of grant support is 200 million, but overall it is closer to a 500 million programme of work, as industry is expected to contribute to this. In terms of the deployment work streams, so as you've been hearing, Swic has got a deployment project. This particular workstream is very much designed to deliver long-term changes that we are going to need, both at specific industrial sites and in terms of shared infrastructure. There is a fair amount of focus on the programme on carbon capture, utilisation and storage, and enabling hydrogen at scale. They're not the only technologies, but these particular ones require very, very large projects with very, very large investments, and require a high level of collaboration. And we've heard a lot about collaboration earlier. So as you can see on the screen, what we're funding are very much kind of engineering design studies, enabling the projects to look at what permits they need and their business plans, and any kind of planning applications, and all of that to be able to, by the end of this funding programme, which runs until March 2024. So around that time or shortly after that, most of the projects will be able to reach final investment decisions, which means that they'll be able to go and get approval to put a spade in the ground. The second work stream, cluster plans, you've been hearing about the South Wales cluster plan, so I'm just going to take it up a level. These plans that we're asking for the clusters to develop, they're very much regional plans, looking at technological and other opportunities, including investment, to meet net zero within their own clusters and their own regions. These projects are by nature meant to be ambitious, and they will result in a roadmap or a plan, a cluster plan, for implementation in each cluster. They are very much the legacy of the industrial, or we hope they will be the legacy of the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge. So whilst a lot of the funding is going on to deployment, and as you can see on the slide, cluster plans have the smallest share of the overall budget, it doesn't mean this is the least important part, far from it, because they lay the foundation for every single one of the clusters to reach net zero. And at this point, I might also mention that the challenge team is looking to develop what we call a UK-wide cluster plan, which will bring together all 6 cluster plans from across the country together and provide a national picture of what is happening in terms of decarbonisation in industrial clusters around the country. And the last work stream, John Maddy has spoken at length about IDRIC, so I'm not going to say much about it at all. It is multidisciplinary research. It's basically research programme underpinning all the other projects and work streams. It's looking not just at technical or technological aspects and R&D requests, but also it's looking at, as John mentioned, policy, skills, diversity and inclusion, and also at knowledge sharing. And knowledge sharing, the sharing of knowledge and expertise is a large part of this programme. To meet net zero, there is no doubt that an awful lot of collaboration and sharing knowledge is required to be able to accelerate the pace of all the wonderful projects that we see, making sure that they do have the impact that is required in the time required, and we don't have that much time left until 2050. Yeah, knowledge sharing is a very, very key part of our programme to ensure that opportunities to decarbonise in clusters are maximised. Oops. Now, moving on to the actual projects. So all of you by now know about the cluster plan and deployment project that are taking place in South Wales. The programme, however, covers the whole of the country, covers 6 of the most, so we're supporting 6 of the most prominent industrial clusters in their mission to decarbonise so that the UK can produce the world's first net zero industrial cluster by 2040. So if you look at the map and the chart that got on screen there, so in orange are all the cluster plan projects. So these are those regional plans I was talking about. There is one in each of the 6 industrial clusters that we support. These are obviously South Wales, Black Country, North West, Scotland, Teesside and Humber. And almost all of the clusters have at least one or a couple of deployment projects. And as you can see at the bottom in yellow, so the deployment projects are in green, and in yellow at the bottom is the activity that Ietf is having. And you just can see those arrows kind of showing the interaction between all the projects, the 15 projects, and Ietf. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what the other clusters are doing. On this map, I need to caveat it, I am aware that it's not particularly exhaustive, neither it is completely accurate, but it will, I insisted on putting this one on screen for you today, is because it will give you an idea of what's going on in the other clusters. There is an awful lot of activity happening, and I just kind of wanted to give an idea of what technologies are being developed and deployed elsewhere. So you can see for yourself, but there's like a lot around, carbon capture and technology surrounding that. Offshore subsea storage facilities. So most of the other clusters are looking at that. Obviously, in South Wales, as Chris and Tony and many others keep reminding me, there are no geological stores anywhere near South Wales. So, South Wales is looking at transport and shipping for both CO2 and hydrogen, but for CO2 in particular. And the other clusters are also looking at being able to receive shipped CO2 and put that into their own stores. So, as I said, it's not everything on the map, but just to give an idea of what's there. So a lot of the clusters are looking at kind of developing CO2 and hydrogen transportation pipelines. One, I think, kind of relevance to South Wales is the one in the Northwest, because it covers a little bit of North Wales. It's probably the shortest trip by ship to go and go into the stores. So whatever is going to be collected from the Northwest will get to the coast, and at that point there will probably be an opportunity for ships to be able to kind of get some of the CO2 that could potentially come from South Wales. And these are all opportunities to be discussed, and there are opportunities in the other clusters as well. Some of the power stations are also looking at kind of modernizing the facilities to be able to reach net zero, and there's a lot of kind of fuel replacement technology being looked at in some of the clusters. So this is just like just wanted to give you an idea of what's happening elsewhere, and also just send a message that it's not just South Wales doing this. it's great what they're doing. But 5 other clusters are looking at this sort of thing. And as you can see, there's a lot of activity going on. And for me, it's quite exciting to hear about so much industrial decarbonisation activity, and also hearing Jenny just before me talking about all the funding that is around now for industrial decarbonisation is quite amazing. And yeah, it's been quite exciting. And as I said, I've been following Swic and the deployment and the cluster plan project for a couple of years now, and I'm always amazed at how much is going on. And it's beautiful to see in Swic Week 2 how much has happened just the whole beginning of the week, in particular, with representative from government and representative from Welsh government, so UK government and Welsh government working together to tackle the net zero agenda, and the amount of work that is being done on day 2 with the local and regional kind of authorities. I think this is absolutely amazing, and it is a testament to how much effort is going into these projects and beyond those projects. It's a testament to the tenacity of the likes of Chris Williams, David Jukes, and Tony Barton, who lead the deployment and cluster plan projects as well, and their teams behind them. It's quite amazing. I think it is no secret to say, I think Chris would be okay for me to say that a couple of years back, Swic was probably one of the lesser developed clusters. And within 2 years, I mean, you can see for yourself with everything that's been said during Swic Week 2, they have made a tremendous project. And I will shut up here.
No, carry on, Geraldine. Please carry on.
Just a bit of praise.
Yeah.
You're far too modest to give yourself praise, so I have to give you praise.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Geraldine. Thanks for the presentation. We've got a good overview, and thanks. We asked specifically, didn't we, for you to talk through the other clusters a little bit, just so people who are relatively new to this process can at least see that it's not just us talking about this. There is quite a lot more, in some ways, more going on in other areas than here. But in other ways, maybe our workload is more spread in terms of different topics.
Yeah, but it's fair to say that all the clusters are very different. There is a lot of commonality, but they all have their own aspects, their own specificities, because of geography, because of layers of government and various layers of local authorities. Scotland and Wales have got different devolved authorities involved. So it's fascinating to just see the diversity in the clusters.
Yeah, and we know some of them clusters have been around for 10+ years as well, haven't they? So they had a sort of foundation to build off, where we had to almost create our own vision relatively quickly and then pick projects. And as you said, thanks to CR Plus and Costain for helping massively in stepping forward and driving those for us. But I can see Dave from Costain has written a question in comments. What is the next step for industrial hubs and their role in cutting emissions? And I think I would add to that as well, Dave, in terms of any rumours yet of phase 2 for cluster plan, well, phase 3 for cluster plan funding and deployment funding, so we can try to sweep up others that aren't in this phase?
Not that I'm aware of right now. So no, certainly the industrial decarbonisation challenge is really aiming to finish about March 2024. That is not to say that there won't be anything else beyond that, but for now, that's what we are.
Yeah, I think hopefully, UK Gov BEIS can see the huge impact and support it's been, isn't it, to our regions, which the projects are coming through, as you've alluded to and shown. So hopefully, follow-on support will come, particularly with cluster plan in particular, because that's such a regional drive, isn't it? It's difficult for any one company or region to support directly. So yeah, hopefully that'll come. Dave, did that answer your question?
To agree, and thank you, Geraldine, and for your explanation. Although I understood it fully, I'm sure it would be brilliant for everybody else on the call. Yeah, it was just more that I'm I'm conscious. You're right. 2024. We've still got a long way to go, and by God, we've got a lot of things to do. You know, but we'll rise to the challenge, and I'm sure the team that are working will achieve it. But I'm thinking more for the next generation of clusters and hubs, and you know, we are the South Wales industrial cluster, say on this call, but actually, you know, there are other regions. I'm currently in the process of developing a new cluster, which you'll be hearing about at some point. But I think the key thing is that we need to keep the momentum going. So I think it's having that vision beyond 2024, even though it's a long way away, that it doesn't just doesn't just fall off a cliff edge there. And I think that's what the cluster plan should hopefully allow us to bring forward.
Absolutely, yes, it's bringing that vision, but it's what you're doing now is looking at what the opportunities are, assessing those opportunities and putting them into a plan, so that gives you the kind of roadmap for the future. I expect those cluster plans to be pretty much live documents. If they do materialize as documents, you know, but certainly as plans, you'll be looking for, you know, funding opportunities in the future, making sure that all these opportunities you've identified can be implemented. Absolutely, you know, that's what I mean by, you know, we expect these plans to be the legacy of the program, because although the program will be closing, we want the cluster plans to be live and owned by each of the clusters. Yeah.
Yeah, Tony's just looking at the comments. Then Tony's just, thanks, Dave. Tony's just added, you know, the clusters that were picked initially, of course, were the biggest industrial emitters, but of course there are wider areas in terms of Mid Wales, North Wales, Bristol, etc., 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 that all can look for support in developing their next phase of funding opportunities to support them, get the momentum. And then Tam has said, could we have a dissemination event conference to bring clusters together and learn from each other? Yes, I think, Tam, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. So you're aware, Tam, we have, even before the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, we have multi-cluster meetings, but it is typically, and I suppose COVID hasn't helped, it is typically just a few people from each cluster. Typically, we limited it to 2. But yeah, you're right, and it is a good point, and it's something we talked about, but we haven't done anything with and forgotten about, is that wider context where we can all show each other properly and discuss and learn from each other. I noticed HyNet put online their supply chain event on Vimeo, and each of the projects presents in quite some detail for what they're exploring. So that, again, we can learn so much off them. And hopefully others will be able to learn off us as well. So yeah, it's a good point, Tam.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Chris, as I mentioned earlier, the sharing of knowledge and expertise is something that is quite key to the program, and it's something that within the program team we want to kind of bring a bit more to the fore. So we're currently looking at developing some kind of knowledge exchange, sort of a program to do exactly the sort of thing that Tam was talking about, you know, whether that be events with all clusters or other ways of engaging. But we want to get, now that all the projects are some way into their development, we'd like to kind of bring everyone together one way or another, and we'll have to explore how best to do that. But it's something that we definitely want to do from now on to the remainder of the program.
Great, thanks, Geraldine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll try and remember how to share my screen now. Right, the last 5 minutes, just wanted to go back to Net Zero Industry Wales. So as a reminder, at the moment, we've just had Swic as an informal grouping. On Monday, Minister of Economy for Welsh Government announced 150k a year funding and the ability for us to create the entity called Net Zero Industry Wales. So just as a reminder, okay, that will provide governance then, of course, formal governance, budget. Industry has already agreed it will pay a subscription to join that entity, which will create a pot of money. And obviously the entity will have governance over the spend of that money. So what we're looking to do within the cluster plan project with Tony, CR Plus and all the other partners, 30 partners, it is go through and understand the plans and detail of what we want to do really over the next 15 years before we get to net zero. Let's say 15. It's a good number to pick out the air. And that will be things like a group on communications, a group on skills, a group on STEM, circular economy, resource energy efficiency, R&D, technology providers and new technologies, enablers, etc. So we're going to try and configure sort of common interest groups that will then have funding, part funding through subscription, but obviously, of course, we can use that as match funding as well for support funding that can come in, hopefully from phase 3 cluster plan. But we can start to configure ourselves as industrial groupings with support and facilitation to drive key areas as a region. So that's the sort of concept of where we're going over the next few years. The funding starts early April. So we are currently writing the job description for the CEO. That will hopefully be out next week. So we'll be looking for a CEO there. We'll be looking for a chairperson and board. We'll be starting to open a bank account, obviously, and start to get the subscription mechanism up and running. And then we'll have what we start to need to have then in terms of governance structure and bank account with some money in to build on what we've started and develop what we brought through from the cluster plan and deployment projects and the other projects that we've all learned from as a group and all recognise where we need to go further forward. So that's kind of where we are at the moment and what the plans are. So in terms of our next steps, we've got to find a chairperson, we've got to find board members, we've got to get the CEO advert out, create a bank account, sort out admin support, subscription mechanism, new website and branding, promotional film, and we'll try and plan for a launch in the summer where we can maybe not get all this in place, depending on recruitment time for CEO, hopefully. We can try and go for a big launch in the summer where we've learnt from the cluster plan, and we've got a year left on cluster plan, so we can overlap the two then in terms of the new entity starting to take shape with cluster plan support to build on and take us further forward for the next 15 years till we're net zero. And then we'll use cluster plan to build those common interest groups and get them up to speed and get them running. So I just wanted to show that and open it up for comment, discussion. See if anybody had any questions. Are people a little bit clearer now on Net Zero Industry Wales? Because we appreciate that might well have confused people. I suppose why I should explain why it's called Net Zero Industry Wales. It was so that we can then learn off Swic and understand what we can do in North Wales and maybe Mid Wales. So there could well be in the future, if it's the right thing to do, a North Wales Industrial Cluster and a Mid Wales Industrial Cluster that would come underneath Net Zero Industry Wales. So the website will typically be Net Zero Industry Wales /Swic. And then as we add the other clusters, if we need to, if it's the right thing to do, we can expand and develop into those areas. Will the deployment and cluster plan have board membership representatives? Well, I can't say definitely yes, but that's the vision at the moment. And the board, of course, will be broken down into voting and non-voting. So we'll try and spread it around our core activity, but also have important representation from our major projects and major industries within that. So I've got to develop a board recruitment matrix, which will go through EDI and also go through skills, company size, projects, etc.
Hi, Chris. One thing that sort of crossed my mind was on the subscriptions. Obviously, some companies will need time to get it into their budgets for next year. So when we're mentioning subscriptions, what sort of time frame do we think we need to get them in? Because some people might be able to do things quicker than others. How does that actually affect the status, basically?
I suppose we'll have to go for asking for it now and
So
go from there.
So there'll be a begging bowl out for the first year, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think we need to probably clear that up, Chris, as soon as we can.
And no doubt, Tony, I think you're right. You know, some people will be able to put money in straight away. I mean, everybody we've spoken to has said they want to, because most people want to chip in to support the way things going. But you're right in terms of timings. Some people will be able to do it straight away, and others will struggle, and then we'll have to work on some kind of negotiation for if maybe somebody can't. And we'll have to work through that and understand how that affects everybody else and what everyone else feels. Be frozen. Did I answer? And John Maddy has put a question in around, has there been any dialogue with HyNet Northwest Cluster about net zero? No, actually, that's a good point, John. Indirectly, but not directly. It's a good point. I should do that. I'll action myself to do that now. Anybody got any more questions? Have I frozen?
No, you've not frozen, Chris.
Okay.
You're good, Chris. It's Tony.
Tony's frozen. Okay. Anybody got any more questions? Nope. Okay, good. So if everybody can keep, I'm going to say if everybody can keep track, I'll try and keep everybody up to speed now. Okay, so we're creating this entity. I suppose what I should do is create a newsletter, shouldn't I, that comes out maybe every other week, just with those actions on. Because obviously what we're keen now is we make sure we get the right chairperson and we get the right board members and we get the right CEO. I'm still on secondment, and I think it's been agreed I'll stay on secondment until the CEO is up to speed, and then we'll take things from there in terms of where Tata are and where the cluster is. So I'm just really keen to make sure we don't lose any continuity and mess things up that way, because you know, we've been in this now for 3 years, like a lot of you have. I don't want that knowledge to be lost, so I'm really keen to make sure I can stay on and continue to build it and make it happen. In terms of Swic Week, then, just referring back on the week, a massive thanks to everybody that's participated and organised, particularly Flora and Catherine from Front Door Communications, Flora Davis from CR Plus, and also Costain in terms of Sarah, David and Martin, and obviously Tony. Massive thanks to Tony for being one of the key instigators in it all. Again, it's been a big team effort, and I'm sure I've forgotten somebody in thanking everybody, but it's all on YouTube, CR Plus. We will make sure they're available. Again, if anybody's got any concerns over cutting any bits out, please let us know. I'm just conscious of time now, so I'll wrap up. Thanks again for finishing Swic Week 2, and we'll look forward to meeting everybody maybe in the summer in our big launch of Net Zero Industry Wales Swic.
Well done, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all. Bang on time. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. Cheers.
Right, I'll be back now.
Oh.